Hello. I guess I'm here because I need clarity. I need to tell someone what's been going on before I lose my mind. My name's Alex, and I've been married to Jessica for 6 years. Up until recently, I thought we had a solid marriage, full of love, trust, and everything else you'd expect. But the past few months have been off. Started with the little things, you know? Jessica and I have always been good about keeping things honest. I'd go to work, come home, and she'd always greet me with a smile and a kiss. Lately, though, she's been distracted. I'd get home, and she wouldn't even look up from her phone. When I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off, saying it was work emails or group chats with her friends. But something in her laugh felt forced, like she was performing. And then there was the handyman, Mark. We hired him about a year ago to fix up some things around the house. A quiet guy, maybe mid-30s, kind of scruffy but good at his job. He came highly recommended, and I trusted him to be in and out of the house while I was at work. At first, Jessica barely noticed him, but then she started bringing him coffee, chatting with him in the afternoons. She called it being polite, but it felt different. I brushed it off. I mean, who gets jealous of the handyman, right? I told myself I was overthinking it. Jessica's always been friendly, so why was I suddenly reading into it? Things escalated when Jessica started coming up with reasons for Mark to stay longer. The deck needs reinforcing, she'd say, or we should get the garage door fixed before winter. Fair enough, I thought. These were all valid repairs. But why was she suddenly so invested in home improvement when she'd barely cared before? One night, about a month ago, I came home early from work. Jessica wasn't expecting me, and when I walked in, I found her laughing in the kitchen with Mark. It wasn't just the laughter, though. It was the way she looked at him, the way her hand lingered on his arm for just a second too long. My stomach churned. "Alex," she said, startled. "You're home early." "Yeah, the meeting ended sooner than expected," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. Mark gave me a polite nod, packed up his tools, and left soon after. That night, I brought it up. I told her I felt uncomfortable with how much time she was spending with him. She got defensive. "You're being ridiculous," she said, rolling her eyes. "Mark's just doing his job, and I'm trying to keep this house in good shape. Would you rather everything fall apart around us?" I dropped it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The final straw came last week. Jessica left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just needed to check the weather. But when I opened the browser, I saw an email notification pop up. It was from Mark. The subject line read, "Tonight." That's when the first piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I know I probably shouldn't have done it, but I clicked on the email. I couldn't stop myself. The subject line was too damn suspicious. The message wasn't long, but it said everything I needed to know. "Jessica, same time as last week? Let me know if Alex is going to be home so I can plan around it. You looked amazing last time. Can't stop thinking about you." My blood ran cold. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Same time as last week? Plan around me? What the hell was going on? I sat there staring at the screen, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to storm upstairs and confront her right then and there, but I stopped myself. If I barged in with no proof beyond an email, she'd just lie her way out of it. I needed more. So I closed the laptop, set it back exactly where I found it, and pretended like nothing had happened. I couldn't let her know I was on to her. Not yet. That night, I told Jessica I was going to a late-night meeting at work. It wasn't true, of course, but I needed an excuse to leave the house. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed almost relieved. Instead of going to the office, I parked my car a few blocks away and walked back to the house. I found a spot in the bushes by the side window, hidden but with a clear view of the living room. Felt crazy, like I was in a bad movie, but I didn't care. I had to know. Around 8 p.m., Mark showed up. He wasn't carrying any tools this time, just a bottle of wine. Jessica opened the door for him, wearing a dress I hadn't seen her in for years. Tight, red, and low-cut, the kind of thing she used to wear when we were dating. They hugged. It wasn't a friendly hug. It was long, close, intimate. My stomach turned, but I couldn't look away. I watched as they sat on the couch, laughing and drinking. The way she looked at him, like he was the only man in the world, used to be the way she looked at me. Then he kissed her. It wasn't soft or hesitant. It was hungry, passionate, and she kissed him back just as hard. Before I knew it, they were pulling at each other's clothes right there in the living room. I couldn't watch anymore. I stumbled away, my breath ragged, my head spinning. I spent that night in my car, parked in some random lot, trying to process what I'd just seen. The anger, the betrayal, the humiliation. It was all too much. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, that would be too easy for her. She'd cry, apologize, make excuses, and try to manipulate me. I couldn't let her control the narrative. If she wanted to destroy our marriage, I was going to make damn sure she paid the price. And Mark? That bastard was going to regret ever stepping foot in my house. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The day after I caught them, I felt like a ghost in my own home. Jessica acted like nothing had happened, like she wasn't betraying me every chance she got. She hummed while making coffee, kissed me on the cheek before I left for work, and even asked if I'd be home for dinner. Took everything in me to play along. But I had a plan now, and it started with gathering proof. Not for her, for me. If this was going to end, I was going to make sure it ended on my terms. The first thing I did was get a hidden camera. I ordered it online, a small one that looked like a charging dock for a phone, perfect for blending in. When it arrived, I placed it in the living room, angled to capture the entire couch where I'd seen them. The second step was syncing Jessica's devices to mine. She'd been careless about her laptop, but her phone was locked. Luckily, I knew her password, her late dog's name. She used it for everything. While she was in the shower one night, I took her phone and installed an app that let me mirror her messages to my phone. Within hours, I started seeing the texts. Mark, can't wait to see you again. Friday night. Jessica, I'll make sure Alex is out. Miss you already. Reading their messages was like stabbing myself in the heart over and over again. But it also fueled me. Every word, every emoji, every disgusting little detail gave me more reason to follow through with what I was planning. Friday night came, and I told Jessica I was going to a poker game with the guys. She didn't even try to hide her excitement. Have fun, she said, practically shoving me out the door. Instead of going to the poker game, I parked down the street and waited. At exactly 7:30 p.m., Mark arrived. He let himself in with a spare key. My spare key. I watched it all unfold on my phone through the camera I'd hidden. They didn't waste time. Mark pulled her into his arms, kissing her like they were in some cheesy romance movie. It was disgusting, but I couldn't look away. I needed the footage. The worst part was how happy she looked. She laughed, touched his face, and whispered things to him I couldn't hear. She used to look at me like that. When they moved to the couch and started pulling at each other's clothes, I turned the camera off. I had enough. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. Jessica was her usual self, cheerful and oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. She even suggested we go out for brunch like we were some happy couple. I went along with it, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was calculating my next move. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to ruin her. And Mark, they weren't going to see it coming. I spent the next few days preparing everything I needed. This wasn't going to be a spur-of-the-moment confrontation. It had to be planned, deliberate, and devastating. First, I compiled the evidence. The hidden camera footage, the emails, the text messages. I backed it all up onto multiple USB drives. Then I printed screenshots of the most incriminating messages. The ones where Jessica talked about sneaking around. The ones where Mark mocked me. One in particular stuck with me. Mark, does he even have a clue? I swear, it's like stealing candy from a baby. Jessica, he's clueless, lol. I'll make sure he's out again Friday. You're amazing. That one. It felt personal. Like they were laughing at me behind my back. And maybe they were. Once I had everything ready, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I wanted to know exactly how much damage I could do with this evidence. Turns out, quite a bit. My lawyer, Sarah, was as ruthless as I'd hoped. "With what you've got," she said, flipping through the pages, "you can push for a divorce on grounds of adultery. Depending on how the judge views it, you might be entitled to a larger share of assets." But I didn't care about the money. Not really. What mattered was the humiliation, the consequences. Jessica and Mark had treated me like a fool, and now it was time for them to feel like one. The next step was confronting Mark. But not directly, no, that would be too easy. Instead, I sent an anonymous tip to his wife. Yeah, it turns out he was married too. Her name was Erica, and she had no idea what kind of man she was married to. I sent her an envelope with copies of the emails and screenshots, along with a note. "You deserve to know the truth. Mark has been cheating on you with my wife. Here's the proof." I dropped it in her mailbox myself, late at night when I was sure no one would see me. The final piece of the puzzle was Jessica's family. Her parents adored me. They always talked about how lucky she was to have found someone as loyal and hardworking as me. I wanted them to know exactly how lucky she'd been. So, I called her father and asked if we could meet for coffee. When we sat down, I could tell he knew something was wrong. "What's going on, Alex?" he asked, concern etched into his face. I slid a USB drive across the table. "You're going to want to see this," I said. He hesitated, looking at me like he wasn't sure he wanted to know. But eventually, he plugged it into his laptop and pressed play. The color drained from his face as he watched. His hand shook as he paused the video, his jaw tight. That's Mark," he stammered. "Yes," I said coldly. "Your daughter has been cheating on me with him for months." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he slammed the laptop shut. "She'll be hearing from me," he growled. Good. Jessica's web of lies was starting to unravel, and she had no idea. I wasn't finished yet, though. I still had one final act of revenge planned, and it was going to be the most brutal of all. In the days leading up to the confrontation, I forced myself to act normal. It wasn't easy. Every time Jessica smiled at me or leaned in for a kiss, I wanted to scream. How could she pretend everything was fine when she was living this double life? But I knew I couldn't blow my cover. Not yet. Jessica seemed happier than she'd been in months, which only confirmed what I already knew. She was relishing her little game. She thought she'd won, that I was blind to her betrayal. That made it easier to stomach the act because I knew what was coming. The trap was set. Mark's wife, Erica, had called me the day after she got the envelope. She was sobbing, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Is this real?" she'd asked, her voice trembling. "Every word," I said. "I've got more if you need it." She didn't hesitate. "Send me everything." By the end of our call, we had a plan. She'd play along with Mark for now, just like I was doing with Jessica. And when the time was right, we'd strike together. Meanwhile, Jessica's father had wasted no time confronting her. He called me the morning after I'd shown him the video, his voice a mix of fury and shame. "She denied it at first," he said. "But when I told her I'd seen the footage, she broke down." "And?" I asked, my tone flat. "She said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything." He sighed heavily. "I don't know what's happened to her, Alex. I thought I raised her better than this." "She made her choices," I replied. "And now she's going to face the consequences." That conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth. Jessica had lied to her own father, just like she'd lied to me. But her excuses didn't matter anymore. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. Friday night rolled around again. And as usual, Jessica told me she had plans with her friends. I pretended not to care, nodded, and kissed her goodbye. As soon as she left, I texted Erica, "Tonight's the night. Be ready." Then I grabbed the USB drives, the printed messages, and a bottle of whiskey. If this was going to be a war, I wanted to enjoy the fireworks. It was time to end this. That Friday night, as Jessica left the house, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes when you know there's no turning back. I waited until I was sure she was gone before grabbing my bag of evidence and heading out. Erica and I had planned everything down to the minute. Mark had told Jessica to meet him at a cozy little motel on the edge of town. Classy, I know. I parked a block away and met Erica in the lot. She looked as determined as I felt, her face set in a grim expression. You ready for this? I asked. More than ready, she said, clutching the folder she'd brought. Let's ruin them. We walked into the motel together. The clerk barely looked up from his magazine as we passed. Not that it mattered. We already knew the room number, 213. When we reached the door, Erica knocked first. Who is it? Came Mark's muffled voice from inside. Room service, she said sweetly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. A second later, the door opened, and there he was shirtless, holding a glass of wine, and looking as smug as ever. His face fell the moment he saw us. Erica? What the hell? Before he could finish, I pushed past him into the room. Jessica was there, sitting on the bed in a silk robe, her face pale as a ghost. Alex? She whispered, her voice trembling. Surprise, I said coldly. Mark turned to Erica, panic written all over his face. I can explain. Save it, Erica snapped, throwing her folder on the bed. We know everything. Jessica started to speak, but I held up a hand to silence her. Don't say a word, I said. You don't get to talk your way out of this. I pulled out my own folder and tossed it onto the bed next to Erica's. Go ahead, take a look, I said. Emails, texts, videos, it's all there. Every disgusting detail of your little affair. Jessica's hands shook as she flipped through the pages, her face crumbling with every word she read. Mark, on the other hand, just stood there, looking like a cornered rat. This isn't what it looks like, he stammered. I laughed bitterly. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, Mark. You've been screwing my wife, lying to your own, and acting like you're untouchable. Well, guess what? You're not. Jessica's tears started flowing, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. Alex, please, she sobbed. I can explain. Explain what? I snapped. That you've been sneaking around with him for months? That you've been laughing at me behind my back? Go ahead, Jessica. Explain. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, realizing there was nothing she could say. Erica stepped forward, her voice icy. Mark, we're done. I've already filed for divorce. And just so you know, every one of your sleazy texts and emails is going straight to my lawyer. Mark's face turned red. You don't have to do this. Don't I? Erica shot back. You made your bed. Now lie in it. Jessica looked at me, her eyes pleading. Alex, can we at least talk? Just the two of us. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. I've already contacted a lawyer. The papers are ready. You'll be served first thing Monday morning. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. I turned to leave, Erica close behind me. Before I walked out the door, I paused and looked back at them. Jessica, broken and crying on the bed. Mark, standing there like the coward he was. You two deserve each other, I said. Then I walked away, slamming the door behind me. As Erica and I walked back to the parking lot, a strange silence hung between us. She looked shaken but determined, her folder clutched tightly against her chest. That was satisfying, she finally said, her voice flat. Not as much as I thought it would be, I admitted. But at least it's out in the open now. We stood by our cars, exchanging a knowing glance. If you need anything, let me know, she said. Lawyers, emotional support, someone to vent to. I'm here. Same, I said, managing a small smile. Good luck, Erica. You too, Alex. She drove off, and I stood there for a moment, staring at the motel. Part of me wanted to go back in, yell some more, maybe throw a punch at Mark, but I knew it wasn't worth it. The damage was done. I went home and poured myself a drink. The house felt different now, emptier somehow, even though Jessica's things were still everywhere. I couldn't stand the sight of it. Her favorite mug on the counter, her sweater draped over the couch, the framed wedding photo on the mantel. I grabbed the photo and shoved it in a drawer. Then I started packing. I didn't want to spend another night in the house. Not after everything that had happened. I called my best friend, Dave, and asked if I could crash at his place for a while. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Of course. Come over whenever." Before I left, I sent Jessica a text. "I won't be home tonight. Don't bother calling me." She replied within minutes. "Alex, please. Let's talk. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake." I didn't respond. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Sarah. I handed her the evidence and told her about the confrontation. She nodded as she reviewed the files, her expression unreadable. "This is solid," she said finally. "With this, you'll have a strong case for divorce on grounds of adultery. You could even push for a larger share of assets if you want to go that route." "I want the house," I said without hesitation. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? Most people want to leave a place full of bad memories." "I don't care," I said. "She doesn't deserve it, and I'll sell it once the divorce is final. I just want her out." "Understood," Sarah said. "I'll start drafting the papers." Before I left, she handed me a business card. "This is for a therapist I know," she said. "I recommend them to all my clients going through tough divorces. You don't have to call them, but it helps." I pocketed the card, unsure if I'd ever use it. Later that day, Jessica's father called me. He sounded furious. "Alex, I don't even know what to say," he said. "She's been crying non-stop since last night." "Good," I said bluntly. "She messed up," he continued. "Big time. But is there any chance you two can work this out? You've built a life together." "She destroyed that life the moment she started sleeping with Mark," I interrupted. "There's nothing to work out." He sighed heavily. "I understand. I'm sorry this happened. You didn't deserve it." "No, I didn't," I said. "But thank you." By the end of the day, I felt emotionally drained. The fallout was just beginning, and I knew it was going to get worse before it got better. Jessica was blowing up my phone with calls and messages, but I ignored every one of them. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her or Mark get away with what they'd done. Over the next few days, Jessica's attempts to contact me escalated. The messages started out apologetic. "Alex, please, I know I messed up. Let's talk. I need you. Can we go to counseling? I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." But when I didn't respond, they turned defensive. "Ignoring me isn't going to solve anything. We were unhappy, Alex, and you know it. It wasn't just me. You were distant too. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened." That one hit a nerve. I almost replied but stopped myself. Let her think whatever she wanted. None of it justified what she'd done. Her calls became relentless. I blocked her number, but she found other ways. Emails, messages through mutual friends, even showing up at Dave's house. "Your wife's at the door," Dave said one evening, his face grim as he poked his head into the spare room I was crashing in. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Tell her I'm not here." "I already did," he said. "She's not buying it." Reluctantly, I got up and went to the door. Jessica stood there, looking disheveled and tear-streaked, her eyes red and puffy. "Alex, can we please just talk?" she begged. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Jessica?" "I want to explain," she said. "I want to make things right." "There's nothing to explain," I said coldly. "And you can't make this right." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "It was a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I was lonely, Alex. You were always working and I felt invisible. Mark, he made me feel seen." I laughed bitterly. "So what? That makes it okay? You felt lonely, so you blew up our marriage?"
No.
I wasn't thinking," she stammered. "I know I messed up, but can't we try to fix this? Please." I shook my head. "I'm filing for divorce. It's over, Jessica. You need to accept that." Her face crumpled. "I love you, Alex," she whispered. "No, you don't," I said, my voice ice cold. "If you did, you wouldn't have done this." I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing on the porch. She stayed there for a few minutes before finally leaving. That night, I got a call from Erica. "Mark's been trying to sweet-talk me into taking him back," she said, her voice laced with disgust. "He's saying all the same things Jessica is, about how it was a mistake, how he felt neglected. Are you considering it?" I asked. "Hell no," she said. "I already gave my lawyer the evidence. He's toast." "Good," I said. "They deserve each other." "Exactly," she replied. "By the way, I found something else you might want to know." "What's that?" "Mark's been using his business to launder money," she said. "I found the receipts and handed them over to my lawyer. The authorities are looking into it now." That caught my attention. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," she said. "If he goes down for this, it'll ruin him financially and legally." A small, grim smile spread across my face. Karma's a bitch. Jessica's desperation only grew in the days that followed. She started reaching out to my family, trying to get them to intervene. She called me. "My sister, Beth," said over the phone, "cried and said she wanted to fix things with you. I told her she should have thought about that before she cheated." "Thanks for having my back," I said. "Always," she replied. "What are you going to do?" "Let her squirm," I said. "And then I'm moving on." I meant every word. Jessica didn't stop. If anything, her attempts to worm her way back into my life became even more brazen. She started showing up at places she knew I'd be. Grocery stores, the gym, even my workplace. One day, I was walking to my car after work when I spotted her waiting near the parking lot. I groaned inwardly but kept walking. Maybe if I ignored her, she'd give up. "Alex," she called, jogging to catch up with me. I stopped and turned, my patience wearing thin. "What do you want, Jessica? Can we talk? Just for a second?" she pleaded. I sighed. "Make it quick." "I talked to Erica," she said, her voice trembling. "She told me about the evidence you have, about what you showed her." "How could you do that, Alex? How could you ruin my reputation like that?" I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "Are you serious right now? You're worried about your reputation? After everything you've done?" "It's not like that," she said desperately. "I didn't think you'd expose you." I interrupted. "No, you thought I'd just sit back and take it. You thought you could betray me and walk away without consequences." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong, okay? I'm sorry. I've apologized 100 times. What more do you want from me?" "I want you to leave me alone," I said firmly. "You made your choices, Jessica. Now live with them." She looked at me like she didn't even recognize the person standing in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I wasn't the same man she thought she could manipulate. Without another word, I got into my car and drove off, leaving her standing there. A few days later, I got a call from Jessica's mother. "Claire." "Alex," she began, her tone soft but urgent. "Can we meet for coffee? I want to talk about everything." I reluctantly agreed. Claire had always been kind to me, and I owed her at least that much. When we met, she looked tired, as though the weight of Jessica's actions had aged her overnight. "I don't know where to begin," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I'm so sorry for what she's done to you, to your marriage. It's unforgivable." "I appreciate that," I said, though my voice was cold. I don't understand why," Claire continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "She told me she felt neglected, that she was lonely, but I don't buy it. You've always been good to her, Alex, better than she ever deserved." I didn't respond. What was there to say? "She's falling apart," Claire added. "I'm not asking you to take her back. I'd never ask that. But please try to have some compassion. She's still my daughter." Compassion. The word felt foreign to me. How could I have compassion for someone who'd torn my life apart? "I'll think about it," I said, though we both knew it was a lie. Meanwhile, things were unraveling for Mark as well. Erica texted me updates occasionally, and they were always satisfying. "The authorities are digging into his finances," she wrote one afternoon. "It's not looking good for him." Good. Jessica and Mark had built their little fantasy world on lies and deceit, and now it was crumbling around them. I wasn't finished yet, though. I still had one final move to make. A move that would ensure they both felt the full weight of their actions. The days following my conversation with Jessica's mother felt like the calm before a storm. I had been methodically planning my final move, the one that would bring this nightmare to its ultimate conclusion. Jessica and Mark thought they were just dealing with the emotional fallout of their affair. They didn't realize I had something much more devastating in store. First, I compiled all the evidence into a detailed file. The emails, the text messages, the footage from the hidden camera, and even the financial records Erica had uncovered about Mark's shady dealings. Then, I started reaching out to people who would take this betrayal personally: Jessica's friends, her coworkers, even her boss. I knew Jessica had always portrayed herself as the perfect wife. She loved being seen as the woman with a solid marriage and a successful husband. I intended to shatter that illusion. The first step was sending an anonymous email to her office. I attached screenshots of her conversations with Mark and wrote a short message. "Your employee, Jessica, has been engaging in an affair with a married man while working on company time. This may not concern you, but I thought you should know what kind of person represents your organization." It wasn't long before I heard through the grapevine that her boss called her in for a serious discussion about workplace conduct. Next, I turned my attention to Mark. He had a reputation for being a friendly, reliable handyman, and most of his business came from word of mouth. So, I created a social media post exposing his actions, complete with photos of him and Jessica together. I made sure it was shared in every local community group I could find. The comments rolled in fast. "Wow, what a scumbag. Never hiring him again. He worked on my house last year. Disgusting. Hope his wife takes him for everything he's got." Erica later told me that his phone was blowing up with angry messages from former clients. His reputation was in shambles and his business quickly dried up. The final step was public and personal. Jessica and I had a shared group of friends, people who'd always seen us as a power couple. I invited them all to a dinner at my sister Beth's house, under the guise of needing their support during a difficult time. When everyone was seated, I stood up, holding a folder filled with the evidence. "I want to thank you all for being here," I began. "You've been like family to me, and I owe it to you to tell you the truth about why Jessica and I are separating." Jessica wasn't there, of course. She tried to invite herself, but Beth told her it was a private event. I laid everything out. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. I showed them the screenshots, the footage, the texts. By the time I was done, the room was dead silent. Finally, Beth spoke up. "I can't believe she did this to you," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "She doesn't deserve an ounce of your kindness." The others echoed her sentiments, their shock quickly turning to outrage. Jessica had burned every bridge she had left, and I had made sure the flames were visible to everyone. That night, I got a text from Jessica. "I don't know what you've done, but everyone's turned against me. My boss, my friends." "What the hell, Alex?" I stared at the screen, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Then I typed back. "I didn't do anything, Jessica. You did this to yourself." And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Jessica's downward spiral started immediately after my message. She called incessantly, leaving voicemails that swung between fury and desperation. "How could you turn everyone against me? You're trying to ruin my life." I didn't respond. Let her stew in it. The next day, I heard from Erica. "Mark moved out," she said. "He's trying to crash with friends, but no one wants to deal with him. The fraud investigation is heating up, too." Perfect. One down. Jessica wasn't far behind. I heard through mutual friends that she was on thin ice at work, and some of her closest allies had distanced themselves after learning what she'd done. Her fortress was crumbling. I couldn't resist giving Mark one last push. I emailed his landlord with a copy of the social media post. "You should know about the illegal activity linked to your tenant," I wrote. 2 days later, Erica texted me. "Mark's been evicted. He's staying in motels now." It wasn't enough to ruin his business. I wanted him to feel what it was like to lose everything. He tried calling me once, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The day Jessica was served with the divorce papers, she showed up at Dave's house unannounced. "Alex, please," she begged as I stood in the doorway, blocking her entry. "We can fix this. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't do this." "It's already done," I said, my voice steady. Her tears didn't move me. I handed her a copy of the papers. "This is your reality now. You built it, Jessica. Enjoy it." I shut the door on her sobbing. Erica texted me with updates about Mark's legal troubles. "They're freezing his accounts," she said. "Between the fraud and the evidence I gave them, he's looking at jail time." "Good," I replied. She sent a second text. "Let's get a drink soon. I think we've earned it." I smiled. Maybe I'd take her up on that. It's been a month since Jessica signed the divorce papers. She moved out of the house and back in with her parents, who are furious with her. From what I've heard, she's struggling to rebuild her life, and Mark is facing charges that could land him in prison. As for me, I'm finally finding peace. The house no longer feels like a reminder of betrayal. It feels like mine. I've started fixing it up, reclaiming it as a symbol of my new life. Erica and I did have that drink. It wasn't a date, just two people who'd been dragged through the same fire. But there was something comforting about knowing someone else understood. If I've learned anything, it's this: trust is fragile, and when it's broken, it can never truly be repaired. Jessica and Mark thought they could cheat, lie, and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. Now I'm moving forward. For the first time in years, I'm focusing on myself, and it feels damn good. That's the end of my story. Thanks for listening. If you're ever in my position, just remember, you don't have to take betrayal lying down. Sometimes the best revenge is standing tall and walking away. Bye-bye.